Mitchell Gaff entered the unlocked apartment of 21-year-old Susan Vesey on July 12, 1980, the morning after her birthday. Vesey was a married mother living on Casino Road in Everett, Washington, with her husband Ken and their 2 young children, a 2-year-old daughter and a 3-month-old son. Gaff had been trying random doors in the area. Once inside, he hid in the kitchen. When Vesey came into the bedroom, he grabbed her from behind. He menaced her with a knife taken from the kitchen, bound her with electrical cord, beat her, raped her, and strangled her. Ken Vesey returned home from a night shift to discover his wife's body on the bedroom floor. The children remained unharmed in the apartment. No immediate suspect was identified. The case went cold. 4 years later, on or about June 1, 1984, Gaff targeted 42-year-old Judith "Judy" Weaver, a mother of 2 who worked as a bar manager at the Bellness Cafe in Everett. Weaver had worked a long shift starting at 6 a.m. Around 9:30 p.m., she asked a bartender to call her a cab because she had been drinking and did not want to drive. When the cab did not arrive quickly, she decided to walk home to her apartment on Rucker Avenue. She stopped at a Dairy Queen for ice cream. A witness later reported seeing her with a young man there. It was the last time she was seen alive. Gaff, then 26, approached Weaver's apartment. He rang the doorbell and knocked on the back door repeatedly. He later stated he became tired and dizzy from going back and forth. He positioned himself between the back door and the bedroom window. When Weaver started to open the back door, he kicked it hard, knocking her to the ground. He entered, sexually assaulted her, beat her, hogtied her with drawstrings and telephone extension cords, and strangled her. He removed the batteries from the fire alarm. He took a butcher knife from the kitchen and cut off her clothes. Before leaving, he wrapped cords around her neck and lit the corner of the bedspread on fire with the intention of covering up the crime and killing her. Weaver died because of his actions. Firefighters responded to reports of smoke. They found the fire contained to the bedroom. Her body was inside with the butcher knife nearby. Gaff later admitted in open court on April 16, 2026, that he did not know either woman beforehand. He used the name Sam Price at the time of his pleas, having legally changed it while living as a registered Level 3 sex offender in Olympia. He read detailed statements describing both killings without showing emotion. These murders were not isolated incidents. Gaff had a documented history of sexual violence. On the day before Thanksgiving in 1979, at age 21, he attacked 29-year-old Jacqueline "Jackie" O'Brien, a Washington State Patrol officer, in her garage in Everett. O'Brien was mowing her lawn and putting away the mower when Gaff confronted her with an air gun that looked like a handgun. He ordered her to her knees and began beating her in the head with the gun, punching her, and slamming her head against the concrete floor and wall. He attempted to bind her wrists. O'Brien, who had interviewed rape victims and knew self-defense, fought back. She threw her body against him, creating an opening. Gaff pulled a hunting knife and slashed her hand as she defended herself. She shoved him and escaped screaming into the alley. Gaff fled, changed clothes, and hid a duffel bag containing the airgun, tape, black leather gloves, stocking cap, and rubber face mask. Police caught him nearby with help from a K-9 unit. He was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon and burglary. The sentence was 30 days in jail with work release and 5 years of probation. While still on probation for the O'Brien attack, Gaff killed Susan Vesey. He remained under supervision when he committed another major crime on August 28, 1984. He had followed one of 2 teenage sisters, ages 14 and 16, home earlier that day in Everett. Their mother slept in the basement. Gaff entered the house at night. He hogtied both girls with electrical cord, cut off their clothes with a knife, raped them repeatedly over more than 2 hours, beat them, choked them, and shocked one with a cord. The younger girl escaped and alerted help. Gaff fled. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of rape and burglary and received an 11.5-year sentence. In later interviews and court proceedings, Gaff admitted attempting to attack up to 30 women or girls per day in the early 1980s. He confessed to raping at least 8 others for which he was never charged. He described himself to the Associated Press in 2000 as a serious piece of crap. During sexually violent predator hearings, he provided details of additional assaults. He was diagnosed as a sexual sadist. After serving prison time, Gaff was civilly committed as a sexually violent predator under Washington law. Juries in 1994 and 2000 determined he remained a danger. He spent years at the Special Commitment Center on McNeil Island. He participated in intensive sex offender treatment, became ordained as a Buddhist priest, came out as gay, and sought release multiple times, claiming remorse. He was eventually released to less restrictive facilities around 2006 and lived under supervision in Olympia. He violated conditions at times, including viewing sexual content. The murder stayed unsolved for decades. In Weaver's case, investigators collected vaginal swabs, ligatures from neck and wrists, and cut clothing. Early DNA technology could not produce full profiles from the mixed samples. By 2020, the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab re-examined the evidence with improved methods, including S-tier mix software capable of separating contributor profiles. They developed a male DNA profile from the ligature after subtracting Weaver's and her boyfriend's DNA. In November 2023, that profile matched Gaff and Cody's, based on his prior rape convictions. Detectives needed a direct confirmatory sample. Gaff rarely left his supervised residence except for short trips. In January 2024, 3 undercover Everett detectives, including cold case detective Susan Logathetti, approached his door in Olympia. They posed as gum industry researchers conducting a flavor taste test. They wore casual clothes and carried flyers. Gaff agreed to participate. He sampled multiple sticks of gum and spit the used pieces into small lidded cups or ramekins provided by the officers. The discarded gum provided usable DNA. Laboratory testing confirmed matches to Weaver's vaginal swabs, neck ligature, wrist ligature, and cut clothing. Gaff was arrested in May 2024 for Weaver's murder. While preparing the Weaver case, Detective Logathetti received a call from Ken Vesey. Vesey's brother, a prior person of interest in the 1980 case, had died, and he wanted updates. As Vesey described the details of his wife's murder, Logathetti noted the similarities. Entry through an unlocked door, binding with cord, sexual assault, beating, and strangulation. Items from the Vesey scene, including white electrical cord used to bind the victim, were resubmitted for updated analysis. DNA from the cord matched Gaff. Additional cord fragments also matched. Gaff was charged with Vesey's murder on March 13, 2026. On April 16, 2026, in Snohomish County Superior Court before Judge Edarin Okoloko, Gaff pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder with premeditated intent, 1 for each victim, as part of a plea deal. He read his admissions aloud. The details aligned with the original investigations and physical evidence. Sentencing was scheduled for May 13, 2026. He faced up to life in prison. He remained in custody. Gaff's attack patterns were consistent. He entered through unlocked doors or windows, used items at the scene such as cords and kitchen knives, engaged in prolonged sexual sadism, beat and choked victims, and sometimes attempted to destroy evidence with fire. Survivors described him as methodical. O'Brien, who fought him off in 1979, attended hearings over the years and expressed ongoing trauma. She stated she regretted not killing him and remained furious that his light sentence allowed further crimes, including the attack on the teenage sisters while he was on probation for assaulting her. The families of Vesey and Weaver endured decades of uncertainty. Suspicion fell on others, including acquaintances and family members. Vesey's children grew up without their mother. Weaver's daughters lived with the loss of their mother. Advances in DNA mixture interpretation, combined with the gum ruse and Gaff's existing database profile, closed both cases. Investigators reviewed his history for potential additional victims. Though no further murders were publicly confirmed as linked at the time of the pleas, Gaff's guilty pleas ended 2 cold cases that spanned more than 4 decades. The convictions relied on physical evidence, DNA matches from crime scenes to the collected gum sample, his detailed courtroom admissions, and the timeline of his known offenses. The gum ruse provided the critical modern link after traditional methods had stalled. Gaff, 68 at the time of the pleas, had spent much of his adult life either incarcerated, committed or under supervision for sexual crimes, yet the two murders occurred in the same city where he had previously offended. The resolution came through persistent cold case work, forensic re-examination, and targeted undercover collection of direct DNA. No additional public statements from Gaff beyond the courtroom admissions were detailed immediately after the pleas. The cases stand as verified examples of how DNA technology and investigative persistence can resolve long unsolved violent crimes committed by repeat offenders. The body of an unidentified woman was discovered on a date in 1991 in or near Gadsden, Alabama, in Etowah County. Authorities responded to the scene where the remains were located. The victim was a Jane Doe with no immediate identification. Investigators documented the condition of the body, estimated age, height, weight, and any distinguishing features or clothing. The cause of death was determined through autopsy as homicide. The case entered the records as the Gadsden Jane Doe of 1991 and remained unsolved with the victim unidentified for years. Etowah County investigators processed the scene for evidence including fingerprints, clothing items, personal effects, and any biological material. The body showed signs consistent with violent death. No purse, wallet, or documents were found that could identify her. Dental records were taken and entered into national databases. Fingerprints were submitted where possible. The case was entered into NAMUS and other missing persons systems once those tools became available. Initial leads focused on local missing women reports from Alabama and neighboring states. None matched perfectly. Gadsden, located in northeast Alabama along the Coosa River, had a population of roughly 40,000 at the time. The area included industrial history with steel mills and manufacturing. The discovery location suggested the victim may have been transported there or killed nearby. Detectives interviewed residents, checked motels, truck stops, and known areas for transients or sex workers if the circumstances fit. Composite sketches or descriptions were released to the public through local media, including the Gadsden Times. Tips came in but did not lead to identification. The victim was estimated in her 20s or 30s based on skeletal examination or soft tissue analysis. Physical characteristics included approximate height, weight, hair color if preserved, eye color if determinable, and any scars, tattoos, or healed injuries. Jewelry, if present, was cataloged. Clothing remnants were described in detail for possible tracing to manufacturers or stores. The manner of disposal indicated an attempt to conceal the body. No immediate suspect was named. The investigation involved Gadsden Police Department and Etowah County Sheriff's Office. Decades passed with periodic reviews. In the 2000s and 2010s, cold case units re-examined files. Advances in DNA technology allowed extraction of genetic profiles from degraded samples. The profile was entered into CODIs. Searches returned no direct hits for convicted offenders in some comparisons. Genealogical DNA testing became a tool in later years for unidentified remains cases across Alabama. Similar cases in the state, such as the Opelika baby Jane Doe identified in 2023 through DNA and genealogy, showed the potential. Investigators compared the Gadsden Jane Doe profile against missing persons databases from Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and further afield. Possible matches were ruled out through exclusionary testing. The case file included details on potential links to other homicides or patterns in the region during the early 1990s. Truck driver activity, hitchhiking, or domestic situations were considered based on common factors in similar cases. No arrest was made. The killer or killers remained unknown. The remains were held at the medical examiner's office before burial in a local cemetery under a Jane Doe marker. Periodic exhumations for additional testing occurred in some Alabama cold cases. Forensic anthropologists reviewed bones for trauma details, perimortem injuries, and any indicators of occupation or lifestyle. Soil analysis or entomology, if applicable, helped narrow the postmortem interval. The official ruling stayed homicide by undetermined means or specific trauma such as strangulation, stabbing, or blunt force depending on the autopsy findings. Local media revisited the case on anniversaries. The Gadsden Times or regional outlets ran stories seeking tips. Families of missing women contacted authorities with names. Each lead required verification through DNA, dental, or fingerprint comparison. Most were excluded. The absence of identification meant no notification to next of kin and no closure for any family. The case highlighted challenges in 1990s investigations before widespread DNA use and national databases. By the 2020s, renewed pushes using genetic genealogy occurred in many Jane Doe cases. Alabama agencies collaborated with organizations like the DNA Doe Project or Othram Labs in select instances. If applied here, volunteers built family trees from distant matches. That process can take months or years and requires law enforcement coordination for confirmation. As of the latest available information, the Gadsden Jane Doe from 1991 had not been publicly identified in major reports. The investigation remained open. Broader context in Alabama included other unidentified victims. The Etowah County John Doe found in 1998 in the Coosa River near Gadsden was a young black male with gunshot and stab wounds. That case also stayed unsolved for identification and prosecution. Patterns of river and wooded disposals appeared in regional files. Interstate corridors near Gadsden saw transient traffic. Investigators checked trucker registries, sex offender lists from the era, and prison releases around 1991. No definitive connections surfaced. The physical evidence collected included any fibers, hairs, or foreign DNA. Touch DNA techniques improved over time. Retesting of stored items occurred when budgets and technology allowed. The case file grew with negative results from database searches. Detectives noted any distinctive items like unusual clothing labels or dental work that could point to a region of origin. If the victim had children or prior arrests, that increased chances of database hits. None materialized quickly. Public appeals asked for anyone remembering a woman who vanished from Gadsden or passed through in 1991. Descriptions circulated. Approximate age range, race, build, and possible last seen locations. Truck stops along I-59, local bars, or motels were canvassed again in cold case reviews. Some tips named possible suspects who were interviewed and cleared or remained persons of interest without charges. Lack of identification prevented full victimology. Motive remained speculative: sexual assault, robbery, domestic, or random encounter. Forensic reconstruction artists produced facial approximations from skull measurements if the skull was intact. Those images were released to the media and posted on unidentified persons' sites. Web sleuth communities and Doe networks discussed the case. Possible names were proposed based on missing lists but excluded upon comparison. The process repeated with each new technology advance. The Gadsden Jane Doe case stood as one of many unsolved homicides in Alabama from that period. Resources focused on newer cases while cold case units handled older ones with limited staff. Annual reviews ensured the file was current with new missing persons reports. As DNA databases expanded with familial searching and genetic genealogy, the probability of resolution increased. Until identification, she remained listed as Jane Doe with case numbers from Etowah County or Gadsden PD. The discovery details involved specific landmarks near Gadsden such as wooded areas, roadsides, or river locations common in local cases. The body condition indicated time since death. Insect activity or decomposition stage helped estimate. No suicide note or obvious accident indicators were present. All evidence pointed to foul play. Autopsy photos and reports stayed restricted. Public information was limited to non-graphic facts to protect the investigation. Over 30 years later, the case file contained thousands of pages of notes, interviews, lab reports, and negatives. Any surviving witnesses or suspects are aged. Memories faded. New generations of detectives inherited the file. They used ViceAP or other violent crime databases to search for similar MOs. Links to other Jane Does in the Southeast were examined. Some cases resolved through DNA, others stayed open. The aftermath included burial costs borne by the county, a marker placed with Jane Doe and the discovery date, occasional visits by investigators or the public. The hope for identification persisted through persistent forensic work. Advances since 1991 transformed many cold cases. The Gadsden Jane Doe represented both the limits of early investigation and the potential of modern science. Authorities continued to seek tips from the public on her identity or the circumstances of her death. No charges had been filed as the victim and full facts remained partially unknown. The case stayed active in cold case logs. Melanie Lynn McGuire, born Melanie Lynn Slate on October 8, 1972, worked as a nurse at a fertility clinic in New Jersey. She married William Bill McGuire, a computer analyst and former U.S. Navy veteran born September 21, 1964. In 1999, the couple had 2 sons and lived in an apartment in Woodbridge Township, Middlesex County, New Jersey. By April 2004, they had closed on a new house in Warren County and planned to move. On April 28, 2004, Bill McGuire was last seen alive after the house closing. Melanie later told authorities and others that she and Bill argued that night. She claimed he slapped her, packed bags, and left the apartment. On April 29, 2004, she filed for a restraining order against him in family court. She did not immediately report him missing. Bill failed to show up for work or other obligations. His family and friends grew concerned. Melanie claimed she assumed he would return. Between May 5 and May 16, 2004, 3 matching dark green Kenneth Cole suitcases were recovered from the Chesapeake Bay near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel area in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Fishermen and authorities found the first suitcase on May 5. Additional suitcases were located on May 11 and May 16. Inside the suitcases, wrapped in black plastic trash bags, were dismembered human remains. The body had been cut into sections at the torso, knees, and other joints. A 5.5-pound free weight was found in one suitcase. Virginia Beach police identified the victim as William McGuire through fingerprints and other records. The cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds from a .38 caliber handgun using wad-cutter ammunition. The investigation linked the suitcases to Melanie McGuire. The couple owned an identical 3-piece set of Kenneth Cole luggage. Black trash bags containing the body parts matched bags from the McGuire apartment through manufacturing batch analysis. Tape on the bags contained DNA from both Melanie and Bill. Green polyester fibers consistent with pillow filling were found on a bullet recovered from the body, indicating the shots were likely muffled with a pillow. Chips of paint and PVC pipe material were present in the suitcases. On April 26, 2004, Melanie purchased a .38 caliber handgun at a store in Easton, Pennsylvania. The receipt showed a $9.95 purchase consistent with a box of wad-cutter cartridges matching the ammunition used to kill Bill. Melanie had access to sedative medications through her work at the fertility clinic. Prosecutors alleged she drugged Bill before shooting him in the couple's Woodbridge apartment. Flesh fragments and DNA consistent with Bill were later found in the trunk of his Nissan Maxima. Bill's car was located at the Flamingo Motel in Atlantic City. Surveillance video showed the car being moved in the early morning hours of April 30, 2004. Melanie admitted she moved the vehicle and claimed it was a prank. Her E-ZPass records showed toll charges in Delaware on or around April 30th, consistent with a trip to dispose of the suitcases. She attempted to have the toll charge removed from her account. An unidentified man, believed to be a relative, also contacted E-ZPass about the charge. Melanie had been having a long-term affair with her co-worker, Dr. Bradley Miller. Prosecutors argued the affair and desire to start a new life provided motive. She told Miller she was going furniture shopping in Delaware, a state with no sales tax. Investigators determined this trip aligned with the timing of body disposal. Melanie maintained she had no involvement in the murder. Melanie was arrested on June 2, 2005, and charged with first-degree murder. A grand jury later added counts including possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose, desecration of human remains, and perjury related to the restraining order application. She pleaded not guilty. The trial began in March 2007 in Middlesex County Superior Court before Judge Frederick DeVesa. It lasted 7 weeks. Prosecutors presented physical evidence including the matching luggage, trash bag manufacturing links, DNA on tape, fibers on the bullet, gun purchase records, ammunition match, car evidence, E-ZPass records, and Melanie's statements. Witnesses testified about the affair, the couple's relationship, and Melanie's actions after April 28. The defense argued Bill had gambling debts and enemies, suggested alternative perpetrators, and challenged the circumstantial nature of the evidence. No direct eyewitness or video placed Melanie committing the acts. No murder weapon was recovered. On April 23, 2007, the jury convicted Melanie McGuire of first-degree murder, desecration of human remains, possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose, and perjury. She was acquitted on some lesser counts related to misleading investigators and medication possession. On July 19, 2007, she was sentenced to life in prison. She began serving her sentence at Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women in Clinton, New Jersey. Melanie has consistently maintained her innocence since conviction. She claimed she was framed and that the real killer remained free. Appeals and post-conviction relief efforts, including claims of ineffective assistance of counsel, were denied. The New Jersey Appellate Division upheld the conviction. She remains incarcerated as of the latest records. Her children were placed with relatives after her arrest. The investigation involved multiple agencies including New Jersey State Police, Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office, Virginia Beach Police, and forensic laboratories. The dismemberment required medical knowledge consistent with Melanie's nursing background. The precision of cuts and use of household items supported the prosecution theory that the murder and disposal occurred in the apartment and involved planning. Bill's body showed no defensive wounds consistent with a drugged state prior to shooting. Bill McGuire was 39 years old at the time of death. He worked as a computer programmer at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Friends described him as outgoing with a history of prior marriage. Melanie was 31 at the time of the murder and 34 at sentencing. The couple's apartment was processed for evidence after the body discovery. Trace evidence in the trunk of the Maxima included flesh fragments that would not shed from a living person. The Chesapeake Bay disposal sites were approximately a multi-hour drive from New Jersey. The suitcases floated and washed ashore due to tidal action. Recovery involved divers and coordinated searches. Autopsies were performed in Virginia and New Jersey. The torso, legs, and other sections were identified through fingerprints, tattoos if present, and DNA. The head was not recovered in initial finds. The wad cutter bullets were low-velocity rounds chosen possibly to reduce noise or over-penetration. Melanie's post-murder actions included filing the restraining order, statements to family and friends about Bill leaving, and continued work at the fertility clinic. She participated in interviews and maintained a normal appearance. Anonymous tips during the investigation were alleged by prosecutors to have originated from Melanie or associates to deflect blame toward gambling associates or others. The trial featured expert testimony on ballistics, fiber analysis, manufacturing forensics for bags and luggage, DNA, E-ZPass records, gun store receipts, motel surveillance, and handwriting or linguistics on communications. Defense experts challenged some interpretations. The jury deliberated and returned the guilty verdicts after weighing the cumulative circumstantial evidence. Sentencing included victim impact statements from Bill's family. The judge imposed life with parole eligibility after 30 years under New Jersey law. The case received extensive national media coverage and was dubbed the suitcase murder. It was featured in documentaries, episodes of Cold Case Files and other programs, and later dramatized in a Lifetime movie. Melanie gave interviews from prison maintaining innocence and alleging investigative flaws. No accomplice was ever charged, though prosecutors did not rule out assistance in disposal. Additional evidence included Melanie's attempts to remove toll records, her explanation for moving the car despite the restraining order claim, and the timing of the affair with Dr. Miller. Bill's computer and other records were examined. No large gambling debts were substantiated as motive for third-party involvement. The prosecution theory centered on Melanie's desire to end the marriage on her terms while pursuing the affair and new life. The full timeline includes the April 28, 2004, house closing and alleged murder that night, April 29 restraining order filing, late April/early May disposal trip, May 5 to 16 suitcase recoveries, identification of Bill, June 2005 arrest, 2007 trial and conviction, and July 19, 2007 sentencing. All facts derive from court records, police reports, forensic analyses, trial testimony, and official statements. The jury determined the evidence proved Melanie McGuire murdered Bill McGuire, dismembered his body, and disposed of the remains beyond reasonable doubt. The conviction stands with no successful reversal. The conviction of Melanie McGuire for the first-degree murder of William McGuire resolved the suitcase murder case through circumstantial physical evidence, behavioral records, and forensic links after the 2004 discovery and investigation. On July 18, 1980, at approximately 12:40 p.m., Ventura County Sheriff's deputies responded to the upper parking lot of Westlake High School in Thousand Oaks, California, after a report of a body. Deputies found the partially disrobed body of a young woman lying near the edge of the lot. She had been dragged a short distance, leaving a visible trail of blood. The victim had been raped, strangled, and stabbed multiple times. Autopsy determined she died within the previous 12 hours from the stab wounds combined with strangulation. She was approximately 4 to 5 months pregnant with a male fetus. The body showed signs she had been killed elsewhere and transported to the parking lot for disposal. She was initially mistaken for a mannequin by the first person who saw her. The victim was estimated at 15 to 25 years old, 5 feet 1 to 5 feet 3 inches tall, weighing 110 to 115 pounds, with brown eyes and black shoulder-length hair with bleached ends. She had penciled eyebrows, pierced ears, extensive dental work, and scars including vaccination marks on her left arm, a scar on her left knee, and an episiotomy scar indicating at least one prior birth. She wore a white pullover short-sleeve top, black bra, red corduroy pants, and black high-heeled open-toed shoes. DNA later indicated primarily Native American ancestry with Hispanic, Caucasian, Sub-Saharan African, and Asian components. No identification documents or purse were found with the body. The case became known as Ventura County Jane Doe or Westlake Jane Doe. 4 days earlier, on July 15, 1980, an irrigation worker discovered the body of another woman in an isolated almond orchard in Delano, Kern County. That victim had been stabbed 29 times, including defensive wounds to the hands. She had been murdered elsewhere and transported to the orchard. Tire tracks were present. She had consumed alcohol with a blood alcohol level of 0.3%. She had distinctive tattoos including a heart with "I love you, Shirley," and Seattle, and another reading "Mother" and "I love you." She had scars on her abdomen and buttock, wore a pink top, jeans, white shoes, and blue socks, and had a leg prosthesis. This victim was later identified in 2021 as Shirley and Susay of the Samson Cree Nation in Alberta, Canada. Wilson Claude Choas Jr., born December 2, 1951, in New Orleans, Louisiana, committed both murders. Choas had a documented history of violence against women. On October 12, 1977, he offered a woman a ride to Topanga Canyon in Los Angeles. He had removed the interior passenger door handles. Once inside, he exposed himself, propositioned her for sex, and threatened her with a knife. He bound her, drove her to a hillside, raped her, strangled her until unconscious, kicked her, and stole clothing and her purse. He was convicted of robbery and kidnapping in that case after a plea agreement dropped the rape charge. He served time and was released 1 month before the 1980 murders in August 1980. Choas approached a woman leaving the College of the Sequoias in Visalia with a knife. She refused to enter his vehicle, gave him her wallet, and escaped when bystanders appeared. He called her the next day about the money. In September 1980, he abducted another woman from the same campus at knife point, robbed and bound her, drove her to a cornfield, raped her, and after she mentioned her husband, returned her and apologized. For the July 1980 murders, Choas' DNA matched fingernail scrapings and other evidence from both victims. He was arrested in 2015 after the DNA hits in Cody's. In May 2018, a Ventura County jury convicted him of the murders of Maricela Rocha-Parga and Shirley and Susay. He was not convicted on the charge related to Parga's unborn son due to laws in effect at the time of the killings. Choas received 2 life sentences without parole plus 4 years. He denied the murders and provided no details about the victims. He is incarcerated at the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison in Corcoran. Maricela Rocha-Parga was born March 12, 1958, in Monterrey, Mexico. She immigrated to the United States with her family and settled in Los Angeles. At the time of her death, she was 22 years old, worked as a waitress in downtown Los Angeles, and attended nursing classes in the evenings. She had a 2-year-old daughter and was 4 to 5 months pregnant with a second child. Family members described her as independent, loving, and caring. She had been studying to become a nurse. Her family searched for her after she went missing in 1980, but received no information on her fate for decades. The father of her unborn child, a Honduran immigrant with ties to the Central American community in Koreatown, Los Angeles, was located in 2021 but provided no additional details on her disappearance. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office re-examined the case in 2011. DNA from the crime scene was analyzed and entered into CODIS. This led to the match with Choist in 2012 or shortly after. Choist was already in the system from prior convictions. He was linked to both the Ventura and Kern County cases through DNA. The Kern County victim, Shirley Soucy, had fallen out of contact with her family in 1979 and had spoken of visiting a friend in Seattle. Her identification in 2021 came through DNA Doe Project work and family DNA comparison. Ventura County Jane Doe remained unidentified despite the killer's conviction in 2018. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office submitted the case to the DNA Doe Project in 2018. Researchers determined the victim had roots in Mexico. The project built a family tree exceeding 125,000 individuals over 7 years, involving more than 40 volunteers and thousands of pro bono hours. They identified a couple born in the late 1800s in Zacatecas, Mexico, as likely great-grandparents. On December 9, 2025, investigators contacted a great-grandson of that couple. He reported that his sister, Maricela Rochaparga, had been missing since 1980. 2 of Maricela's siblings flew to California the next day and provided DNA samples. Testing confirmed the match in January 2026. The identification was publicly announced on February 23, 2026. The DNA Doe Project described the case as their toughest due to distant matches, limited public records, and the need for extensive multi-generational tree building. Forensic genealogy combined with traditional investigation and direct family reference samples resolved the identity 45 to 46 years after the murder. The victim's remains could then be returned to family. Detectives noted she was likely a random target abducted, assaulted, and killed before her body was dumped. No evidence indicated she knew Choist. Choist's criminal activity concentrated in Tulare, Los Angeles, Ventura, and Kern counties. He frequented areas in those regions around the time of the murders. Surviving victims testified at his 2018 trial about the rapes and abductions. One witness, Carolyn Bell, and her son Patrick testified about Choist allegedly admitting to killing a woman and asking for help cleaning his vehicle afterward. He claimed it was a deer when confronted. Choist's defense argued DNA did not place him at the scenes and claimed consent in some interactions. The jury rejected those arguments for the murder counts. The 1980 investigations involved collection of fingernail scrapings, clothing, and biological evidence that was preserved for decades. Tire tracks and drag marks at the Westlake High School scene supported the body dump theory. The Kern County scene had similar transportation evidence. Autopsies documented the extent of stab wounds, strangulation marks, and sexual assault. Parga's pregnancy was confirmed through examination, and the fetus was noted as well-nourished with adequate prenatal care. Her prior birth was evident from scarring. Dental records and anthropological analysis provided initial descriptors but no identification until genetic work. Prior to the DNA match, both Jane Doe cases remained open with reconstructions, descriptions, and appeals for tips circulated through media and databases such as NAMUS and Doe Network. The cases were featured in media including cold case files and other documentaries after the killer's conviction. Public appeals included photos of clothing and tattoos for the Kern victim. The resolution for Parga's identity required coordination between Ventura County Sheriff's Office detectives, the DNA Doe Project, genetic labs, and family members. Maricela Rochaparga's family maintained hope and continued searching through the years. Her siblings' quick response with DNA samples finalized the confirmation. The identification provided closure on her identity, while the conviction had already established accountability for the perpetrator. Choist refused to cooperate with identification efforts or provide motive details. He maintained no knowledge of the victims' names. The murders occurred shortly after his release from prison on the 1977 charges. His pattern involved knife threats, abduction or attempted abduction in vehicles, rape, violence, and disposal of victims. The Ventura County case file included scene photography, blood trail measurements, clothing analysis, and trace evidence. No fingerprints or immediate witnesses identified the suspect in 1980. Advances in DNA extraction and Cody's usage in the 2010s provided the link. Genetic genealogy filled the remaining gap for victim identification. The process for Parga involved extraction and sequencing through partners like Fulgent Genetics, bioinformatics support, and database comparisons on GeneMatch Pro and Family Tree DNA. Over 40 volunteers contributed. The 7-year effort represented one of the largest single-case genealogy projects for the organization. Post-identification, the Ventura County Sheriff's Office and District Attorney's Office held a joint press conference announcing the name restoration. Officials emphasized the persistence of cold case work and scientific advances. Family members received support for final arrangements. The case demonstrated how a killer could be convicted years before his victims received their names back through separate but complementary forensic paths. Choa's sentences ensure he will remain incarcerated for life. No additional murders have been publicly charged against him, though his history of repeated offenses against women spanned at least from 1977 to 1980. Investigators reviewed potential links to other unsolved cases in the regions he operated but focused prosecutions on the 2 DNA-linked murders. Parga's daughter from her prior relationship grew up without her mother. The family's decades-long uncertainty ended with the 2026 confirmation. The Westlake High School parking lot scene remained a documented location in case records. Evidence custody followed strict chain-of-custody protocols allowing later testing. The 2011 re-examination proved pivotal for developing the profile that matched Choist. Subsequent genealogy on the victim's side closed the identification loop. The full timeline includes Parga's birth in 1958, immigration, life in Los Angeles as a waitress and student, disappearance in 1980, body discovery July 18, 1980, parallel Kern County murder July 15, 1980, Choa's prior crimes and release, the 1980 assaults, DNA entry and match in the 2010s, arrest 2015, conviction 2018, Susse identification 2021. Parga genealogy work 2018 to 2025, family contact December 2025, confirmation, January 2026, and public release February 2026. All facts derived from court records, sheriff's office releases, DNA Doe project documentation, autopsy summaries, and trial testimony. The physical evidence, DNA matches, and genealogical connections establish the verified sequence of events without reliance on unconfirmed speculation. Additional procedural elements included anthropological assessments confirming ancestry and prior pregnancies, toxicology where applicable, tire track documentation, clothing and personal effect inventories, and repeated database searches over decades. Choist's post-arrest interviews yielded no admissions. Trial testimony from surviving victims detailed his methods of operation with knives and vehicles. The Bell family testimony provided circumstantial context on his behavior immediately after one killing. Sentencing accounted for the 2 murder convictions under applicable statutes. The fetus charge outcome reflected 1980 legal standards. Post-conviction, Choist remained at Corcoran. The victim identification allowed updated death certificates and family closure processes. The collaborative effort between law enforcement and genetic genealogists resolved a 46-year unidentified homicide victim case tied to a previously convicted perpetrator. On December 20, 1984, 12-year-old Jonelle Matthews performed in a Christmas concert with her school choir at Greeley Central High School in Greeley, Colorado. A friend's family dropped her off at her family's home on 12th Avenue around 8:30 p.m. She entered the house alone. Her parents, Jim and Gloria Matthews, and her older sister Jennifer returned approximately 1 hour later to find the house empty. Jonelle's red jacket and other items indicated she had been home briefly. The front door was unlocked. Shoe prints in the snow outside had been raked over in an attempt to obscure them. No signs of forced entry were immediately apparent. Jonelle was reported missing that night. Greeley Police Department and Weld County authorities launched a large-scale search. Volunteers, law enforcement, and tracking dogs covered the area. The case received extensive local and national attention. Jonelle appeared on milk cartons and in missing persons alerts. Rewards were offered. Initial focus included family members. Jim Matthews was questioned extensively and eventually cleared through alibi verification and polygraph examinations. No ransom demand was received. No witnesses reported seeing an intruder or vehicle at the residence that evening. Stephen Dana Pankey lived in the same Greeley neighborhood at the time with his wife and children. He attended the same church as the Matthews family. Pankey had no documented prior relationship with Jonelle but later inserted himself into the investigation. He contacted police and media with unsolicited information and theories. He ran for political office in Idaho years later and made public statements about the case. On July 23, 2019, pipeline construction workers digging near County Roads 34.5 and 49, approximately 15 miles southeast of Greeley, uncovered human skeletal remains in a shallow grave. Clothing remnants matched the red blouse, dark blue sweater vest, and skirt Jonelle wore the night she disappeared. The Weld County Coroner's Office used DNA comparison and dental records to confirm the identity as Jonelle Matthews on July 25, 2019. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. The remains had been buried in a rural field along a route consistent with vehicle access from Greeley. No usable perpetrator DNA was recovered from the scene or remains due to decomposition and environmental exposure over 34 years. Stephen Pankey became the primary suspect. Investigators documented his repeated contacts with police over decades, including offers of information that sometimes contradicted known facts. He voluntarily provided DNA in 2019 after learning no DNA evidence existed in the case. That sample did not link him directly to the remains or scene. The case against him relied on circumstantial evidence, behavioral patterns, false statements to authorities, and his demonstrated knowledge of details not publicly released. Pankey had access to firearms. He made statements placing himself near the Matthews home on the night of the disappearance in October 2020. A Weld County grand jury indicted Pankey on charges of first-degree murder after deliberation, felony murder, second-degree kidnapping with a deadly weapon, and false reporting to authorities. He was arrested in Idaho and extradited to Colorado. Bond was set at $5 million. Pankey pleaded not guilty. His first trial in October 2021 ended in a hung jury on the murder and kidnapping counts. The jury convicted him on the false reporting charge. A mistrial was declared on the major counts. The retrial began in 2022. Prosecutors presented evidence of Pankey's unusual interest in the case, his movements on December 20, 1984, and inconsistencies in his statements over the years. Witnesses testified about his behavior and comments. The defense argued the evidence was insufficient and suggested alternative suspects or theories. On October 31, 2022, a Weld County jury convicted Pankey of felony murder, second-degree kidnapping with a deadly weapon, and false reporting. He was acquitted on first-degree murder after deliberation. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. His earliest possible release date is 2042, when he will be 91 years old. As of 2025, Pankey is incarcerated at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility in Ordway, Colorado. The investigation spanned 38 years from disappearance to conviction. Early efforts involved door-to-door canvassing, vehicle checks, and interviews with hundreds of people. Shoeprint analysis and rake marks suggested an attempt to conceal evidence at the abduction scene. No fingerprints or biological evidence directly linked a suspect in 1984. The case was reviewed multiple times as forensic technology advanced. Jonelle's DNA profile was entered into databases, but no offender hits occurred. The 2019 discovery of the remains shifted the case from missing person to homicide and prompted renewed focus on persons of interest. Pankey's history included runs for Idaho governor in 2014 and 2018 as a Republican. He positioned himself publicly on law and order issues. Investigators documented thousands of online searches by Pankey related to the Matthews case, particularly after the body discovery. He contacted law enforcement voluntarily on multiple occasions and provided alibis that required verification. His wife at the time provided statements about his activities on the night of December 20, 1984. Trial testimony covered phone records, vehicle information, and Pankey's familiarity with rural areas southeast of Greeley, where the body was buried. Jonelle Matthews was born in 1972. She was described as outgoing and involved in school and church activities. The family home in Greeley was in a residential area. The Christmas concert that evening was a standard school event. Jonelle changed clothes upon arriving home before disappearing. Her sister Jennifer later became active in cold case advocacy. The Matthews family cooperated with investigators for decades and maintained hope until the remains discovery confirmed her death. The burial site was in an agricultural field accessible by vehicle. The shallow grave and lack of deep digging suggested hurried disposal. Clothing preservation aided identification. An autopsy confirmed the single gunshot wound as the cause of death. No other significant trauma was detailed in public reports. The pipeline crew's discovery at approximately 4:50 p.m. on July 23, 2019, triggered immediate coroner and law enforcement response. Chain of custody for the remains and artifacts was maintained for forensic processing. No direct physical evidence such as fibers, hairs, or DNA from Pankey was recovered at either the abduction scene or burial site. The prosecution built the case on a timeline of Pankey's actions, his post-crime statements, his insertion into the investigation, and circumstantial placement near the events. Defense arguments highlighted the absence of forensic links and questioned witness credibility after decades. The second jury accepted the cumulative evidence as proof beyond reasonable doubt for the kidnapping and resulting felony murder. The conviction closed one of Colorado's longest-running cold cases. Weld County District Attorney Michael Rourke's office handled the prosecution. The trials occurred in Weld County District Court. Media coverage included national outlets due to the duration and circumstances. The case appeared in documentaries and true crime programming. Jonelle's remains were returned to the family for burial after forensic examination. Memorials and tributes continued in Greeley. Pankey maintained his innocence throughout the legal process. He filed appeals following the conviction. The false reporting conviction stemmed from statements made to authorities that investigators proved false. The kidnapping charge involved the abduction from the home. Felony murder applied because the death occurred during the commission of the kidnapping. Sentencing accounted for the statutes in effect in 1984 and at the time of conviction. The 20 years to life structure reflected Colorado sentencing guidelines for the counts. The Matthews family issued statements after the verdict expressing relief at the resolution while acknowledging the decades of uncertainty. Gloria Matthews spoke publicly about the impact. The case demonstrated challenges in pre-DNA era abductions where limited physical evidence existed. Advances in digital record analysis, historical phone data, and persistent suspect monitoring contributed to the eventual charges. Pankey's political activities and public profile increased scrutiny of his past statements. Additional investigative steps included cross-referencing Pankey's known vehicles with any witness descriptions from 1984, review of his employment and travel records, and analysis of media interviews he gave over the years. Multiple polygraphs and interviews with Pankey produced inconsistencies noted by detectives. The rake used on the snow at the Matthews home was documented as an attempt to destroy footprint evidence. Neighbors and church members provided background on community dynamics in 1984 Greeley. The discovery of the body 15 miles from the home indicated transportation by vehicle after the abduction. The gunshot execution-style wound suggested control over the victim at the time of death. Burial in a remote field minimized immediate detection. Oil and gas development in the area eventually exposed the site decades later. Construction workers followed protocols upon finding remains, preserving the location for investigators. Post-conviction, the case file was closed with a homicide conviction. No additional suspects were charged. Earlier persons of interest from the 1980s were excluded through alibis and evidence review. The absence of perpetrator DNA underscored reliance on circumstantial and behavioral evidence. Pankey's decision to provide DNA after learning it would not match demonstrated awareness of forensic limitations at the time. Trial exhibits included timelines, maps of locations, and records of Pankey's communications. The full timeline covers the December 20th, 1984, disappearance, immediate search, decades of cold case status, 2019 body recovery and identification, 2020 indictment, 2021 trial and partial conviction, 2022 retrial and full conviction, and sentencing. All elements rest on court records, coroner reports, police documentation, and trial testimony. The evidence presented established Pankey's responsibility for the kidnapping and murder of Jonelle Matthews according to the jury verdict in the second trial. The resolution required sustained investigative effort across multiple decades and agencies. On November 21, 1983, 15-year-old Linda Mann left her home in Narborough, Leicestershire, England, to visit a friend. She took a shortcut along a footpath known locally as the Black Pad after learning her friend was ill. Linda did not return home. Neighbors and family searched through the night. The next morning, her body was found raped and strangled on the deserted footpath. Semen samples recovered from her body showed type A blood and a specific enzyme profile present in approximately 10% of males. Leicestershire police conducted an extensive investigation but identified no suspect. The case remained unsolved, and on July 31, 1986, 15-year-old Dawn Ashworth left her home in Enderby to visit a friend's house. She took a shortcut along a footpath called 10-Pound Lane. Dawn did not arrive. 2 days later, on August 2nd, her body was discovered in a wooded area near the footpath, partially covered with twigs, branches, and nettles. She had been beaten, raped, and strangled. The modus operandi matched the 1983 attack on Linda Mann. Semen samples from both victims indicated the same blood type and enzyme profile, establishing that the same perpetrator had committed both murders. The cases were linked as the Narborough Inquiry. Colin Pitchfork, born March 23, 1960, lived in Littlethorpe near Narborough. He worked as a baker, was married, and had 2 young sons. On the evening of Linda Mann's murder, Pitchfork left his baby son sleeping in the back of his car, attacked Linda, raped and strangled her with her own scarf, then returned home and put his son to bed. 3 years later, he committed the identical crimes against Dawn Ashworth less than a mile from the first scene. Initial police focus in the Dawn Ashworth investigation centered on 17-year-old Richard Buckland, a local man with learning difficulties who worked near the scene. Buckland was questioned and confessed to Dawn's murder under pressure but denied any involvement in Linda Mann's killing. Police believed one perpetrator committed both crimes based on the semen evidence. Buckland became the prime suspect for both that in late 1986 and early 1987. Dr. Alec Jeffreys at the University of Leicester had developed DNA profiling, also known as genetic fingerprinting. Leicestershire police approached Jeffreys to test semen samples from both victims and a blood sample from Buckland. Jeffreys confirmed the semen from both crime scenes came from the same man. Buckland's DNA profile did not match. Buckland was exonerated and became the first person cleared of a crime by DNA evidence. The true perpetrator remained unidentified. Police launched the world's first mass DNA screening. They collected blood or saliva samples from nearly 5,000 men aged 18 to 34 who lived or worked in the 3 villages of Narborough, Enderby, and Littlethorpe. The operation was voluntary but extensive. Pitchfork initially avoided providing a sample by persuading a colleague, Ian Kelly, to impersonate him and give a sample in his name. Kelly used Pitchfork's passport as identification. In August 1987, a woman overheard a conversation in a pub in which Ian Kelly admitted he had taken the DNA test for Colin Pitchfork. She reported the information to the police. Officers arrested Pitchfork on September 19, 1987. His blood sample was taken and tested. The DNA profile matched the semen from both Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth crime scenes. Pitchfork confessed to both murders, 2 additional indecent assaults, and perverting the course of justice by arranging the substitute sample. Pitchfork pleaded guilty on January 22, 1988, in Leicester Crown Court to 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of rape, 2 counts of indecent assault, and 1 count of conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. He received 2 life sentences with a minimum term of 30 years. The judge described the crimes as particularly brutal. Pitchfork became the first person in the world convicted of murder based on DNA profiling evidence. Pitchfork's appeals reduced the minimum term to 28 years in 2009. He became eligible for parole review after serving the tariff. In 2021, he was granted parole and released on license on September 1, 2021, subject to strict conditions described as among the most stringent ever imposed. He was recalled to prison on November 19, 2021, after approaching young women in the community. Subsequent parole applications in 2023 and later were refused by the parole board, which determined he continued to pose a risk of serious harm. As of late 2025, he remained incarcerated. The investigation prior to DNA involved traditional methods including house-to-house inquiries, vehicle checks, and analysis of the limited forensic evidence available in the early 1980s. The semen samples provided blood group and enzyme information but could not individualize the donor until Jeffrey's technique. The mass screening required coordination across multiple villages and processing of thousands of samples at Jeffrey's laboratory. Pitchfork's attempt to evade the screen through substitution was the critical break that led to his identification. Pitchfork had a prior criminal history of flashing and minor sexual offenses. He targeted young women walking alone on secluded footpaths. Both victims were 15 years old, of similar appearance, and attacked in broad daylight or early evening on familiar local paths. Post-attack, he returned to normal family life. He showed no remorse in initial interviews and attempted to minimize his actions. The DNA breakthrough had immediate and long-term impact. It demonstrated that genetic profiling could link separate crime scenes, exonerate the innocent, and identify perpetrators with high certainty when reference samples were obtained. The technique was refined and adopted worldwide. The Narborough mass screening set a precedent for large-scale voluntary or directed DNA collection in investigations. Buckland's exoneration highlighted the reliability of the new science even against a false confession. Linda Mann's family and Don Ashworth's family endured years of uncertainty before the convictions. The communities in Narborough and Enderby experienced heightened fear during the years between the murders and the arrest. Footpaths that were once routine shortcuts became avoided. Police resources were stretched across the linked inquiry. The eventual resolution through DNA validated the investment in forensic science at the University of Leicester. At trial, Pitchfork admitted the full facts of both attacks. He described leaving his infant son in the car during the first murder. For Don Ashworth, he detailed the struggle, rape, and strangulation. The court accepted the DNA matches as conclusive. Sentencing reflected the double murder, sexual violence, and deliberate obstruction of justice. Pitchfork's later parole hearings involved detailed risk assessments, victim impact statements, and psychological evaluations. Decisions consistently referenced the premeditated nature of the crimes and his history of sexual offending. The physical evidence in both cases included semen, ligature marks from strangulation with scarves or similar items, and signs of violent struggle. No fingerprints or other identifiers linked Pitchfork directly at the time due to 1980s technology limits. The semen DNA provided the individualizing match once samples were compared. Scene locations were within a small geographic radius, facilitating the focused mass screening. Pitchfork lived and worked in the immediate area, increasing his opportunity but also his inclusion in the DNA dragnet. Post-conviction, Pitchfork served his sentence primarily in closed conditions before parole attempts. He participated in sex offender treatment programs. Parole board panels reviewed his progress, institutional behavior, and ongoing risk factors including potential contact with young females. Public and political scrutiny accompanied each review due to the landmark status of the case and the nature of the offenses. Release decisions required satisfaction that he no longer posed a risk of serious harm. Multiple denials followed breaches and risk assessments. The case established protocols for DNA evidence handling, chain of custody, and statistical interpretation of matches. Jeffrey's multi-locus probe technique evolved into modern STR profiling used in databases like the UK National DNA Database. The Narborough investigation consumed thousands of police hours and laboratory resources. It remains a foundational example in forensic science training worldwide. Richard Buckland received compensation and public acknowledgement of his wrongful accusation and false confession. Additional facts from the investigation included Pitchfork's employment as a baker at a local factory, his marriage, and the birth of his children around the time of the crimes. He continued normal routines between offenses. Witnesses recalled seeing him in the villages. His substitution attempt involved coaching Kelly on details to avoid detection during sampling. The pub conversation that exposed the fraud occurred among co-workers. Police acted swiftly on the tip, confirming identity through records and obtaining a fresh sample. The DNA match probability was overwhelmingly high, eliminating any reasonable doubt. The full timeline runs from Linda Mann's murder on November 21, 1983, discovery the following day, stalled investigation, Dawn Ashworth's disappearance July 31, 1986, body discovery August 2, 1986, linkage of cases, Buckland's false confession and exoneration in 1987, mass screening, Pitchfork's exposure and arrest September 19, 1987, guilty pleas January 22, 1988, sentencing January 23, 1988, tariff appeals, parole reviews from 2018 onward, release and recall in 2021, and subsequent denials through 2025. All elements rest on court records, forensic laboratory reports, police documentation, and official statements. The DNA evidence, combined with Pitchfork's confession and behavioral history, established his responsibility for the rapes and murders of Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth. Further procedural details included preservation of semen swabs from both autopsies despite limited initial testing capability. Jeffries' laboratory processed reference samples under controlled conditions. The mass screening required logistical planning for collection sites, consent forms, and sample labeling to prevent errors. Over 4,500 men complied before Pitchfork's sample was obtained. Quality control in early DNA work involved duplicate testing. Statistical reporting of match probabilities was conservative. The technique's court admissibility was established through expert testimony from Jeffries. Subsequent cases built directly on this precedent. Pitchfork's additional admitted indecent assaults occurred in the same region and followed similar patterns of approaching young females. No other murders were conclusively linked to him. The families of both victims provided statements during sentencing and later parole processes detailing lifelong impacts. The villages erected memorials and maintained awareness of the crimes. The case file remains a documented milestone in the transition from serological to genetic forensic identification. On December 5, 1975, 19-year-old Lindy Sue Beechler returned to her apartment at Spring Manor Apartments, 104 Kloss Drive in Manor Township, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, after a trip to the grocery store between approximately 6:45 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. She lived there with her husband Philip Beechler, whom she had married about a year earlier. Lindy worked at a flower shop or greenhouse and had expressed interest in opening her own shop. Philip was studying at Millersville State College to become an art teacher. Grocery bags remained on the dining room table. Between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m., David Vincent Sinopoli, then 21 years old and a resident of the same 4-unit building, entered her apartment. He stabbed her 19 times in the neck, chest, upper torso, and back using a 4-inch blade and then a butcher knife taken from her kitchen. A tea towel was wrapped around the handle of the butcher knife left embedded in her neck. Evidence indicated sexual assault. Blood was present on the outside of the front door, the entranceway wall, and patches on the carpet. A male footprint was found in the kitchen. Lindy's aunt and uncle stopped by around 8:46 p.m. to exchange recipes and discovered the body. They called the police. Autopsy confirmed multiple stab wounds with defensive injuries. Semen was recovered from her underwear. Blood on her pantyhose was later linked to the perpetrator. No signs of forced entry were noted in initial reports, though the exact method of entry was documented in the investigation. Lindy had no known enemies. Initial canvassing interviewed nearly 100 people in the first days, expanding to 250 to 300. Police sought information on a dark-colored standard-size American car double-parked near the complex with headlights on between 7 p.m. and 8:40 p.m. Philip Beechler was cleared after verification of his work alibi. David Vincent Sinopoli was born January 8, 1954, in Lancaster to Julia and George Sinopoli. He attended J.P. McCaskey High School, graduating in 1972, and was involved in the Civil Air Patrol. At the time of the murder, he was married to his first wife and lived in the same apartment complex as the Beaglers. He worked as a pressman at Steckel Printing for nearly 30 years before later employment at Yurchak Printing. He moved out of the complex sometime prior to August 1975. Investigators did not identify him as a suspect during the original investigation. The case generated extensive early leads. In March 1976, the stabbing death of 43-year-old Mary Shinzing in Colombia was examined for links but solved with the arrest of Kenneth Dale Arndt. In 1976, Lindy's tombstone at Boehm's United Methodist Church in Pequea Township was vandalized with red paint. A 1977 letter to police claiming responsibility was deemed a hoax. In 1982, mass murderer Gerald Eugene Stano was briefly considered due to his father's local connection, but ruled out. Psychics consulted in the early 1980s provided descriptions that matched a ruled-out suspect. A 1989 attempt at early DNA analysis on a blood spot failed due to technology limits. The case was presented to the Vidic Society in 2006. A billboard seeking tips was erected in 2007 by Lindy's half-brother. In 1997, DNA testing identified male semen on evidence, establishing sexual assault as part of the crime but producing no database match at the time. In 2018, after the genetic genealogy resolution of the 1992 Christy Myrick murder by Raymond Rowe, Lancaster County District Attorney's Office pursued the same approach for the Beachler case. In 2019, Parabon Nanolabs released phenotype composites of the suspected killer at ages approximately 25 and 65. In December 2020, further genetic genealogy work began. By December 2021, analysis pointed to Sinopoli based on Italian ancestry from Gasparina in southern Italy, limited matching family trees among Lancaster residents of the right age and gender in 1975, and his prior residence in the apartment complex in February 2022. Investigators surveilled Sinopoli and his wife as they traveled to Philadelphia International Airport. Detectives recovered a coffee cup Sinopoli discarded in a trash can. DNA extracted from the cup matched the semen profile from Lindy's underwear. The blood on her pantyhose was consistent with the same contributor. On July 17, 2022, 68-year-old David Sinopoli was arrested at his East Hempfield Township home on charges of criminal homicide. He had lived in Lancaster County continuously since 1975, later marrying a second wife for 36 years and having children and grandchildren. Sinopoli was held without bail. On October 19, 2023, he pleaded guilty in Lancaster County Court to third-degree murder, aggravated assault, and burglary under a plea agreement. He was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison, the maximum allowable under 1975 sentencing guidelines for each count. He was ordered to pay over $25,000 in prosecution costs, primarily for DNA testing. In court, Sinopoli stated he wanted to apologize to everyone, including his wife. He did not provide a detailed motive during the hearing. Assistant District Attorney Christine Wilson described the killing as cold-blooded and brutal. President Judge David Ashworth noted the depravity of stabbing Lindy 19 times and then sexually assaulting her. Philip Beachler addressed Sinopoli directly, stating he forgave him per his beliefs but that Sinopoli needed to pay for his actions. Other family members provided victim impact statements. The investigation spanned 46 years, 7 months, and 12 days from the murder to the arrest. Early efforts included exhaustive interviews, vehicle searches, psychic consultations, and behavioral analysis of the hoax letter. Later forensic work involved repeated attempts at DNA analysis as technology improved. Genetic genealogy through Parabon Nanolabs narrowed the pool using autosomal DNA, family tree construction, and geographic and ethnic filters. The discarded coffee cup provided the direct confirmatory sample matching crime scene evidence. No other suspects were publicly named or charged in the case. Sinopoli had no prior documented connection to Lindy beyond proximity in the apartment complex. Lindy Sue Beachler was born January 31, 1956. Her parents separated when she was young. She was described by her husband as encouraging his education and dreaming of a family. After her death, Philip Beachler completed college and graduate school, became an artist and teacher, but described a period of grief, isolation, substance use, and delayed remarriage. The case remained Lancaster County's oldest unsolved homicide until the 2022 arrest and 2023 resolution. It demonstrated the progression from traditional policing to advanced forensic genealogy combined with covert DNA collection. Physical evidence included the 2 knives, blood spatter patterns, the footprint, and biological samples preserved for decades. The resolution closed the file with a guilty plea and sentence that ensured Sinopoli would likely die in prison. No additional crimes were publicly linked to Sinopoli in official statements at the time of sentencing. The apartment complex and local community had followed the case through decades of media coverage, billboards, and composite releases. Sinopoli maintained a low public profile as a printing press operator before and after the murder. His family learned of the charges alongside the public. The plea spared the family a full trial while securing a conviction based on DNA, residency records, and investigative timeline. Further details from the original investigation included door-to-door canvassing of the Spring Manor complex and surrounding areas, review of all male residents and visitors, and checks on known sex offenders or violent criminals active in 1975. Composite sketches and suspect descriptions evolved over time but aligned with Sinopoli's general appearance once identified. The semen DNA profile, once developed, was entered into databases without hits until genealogy provided the familial direction. Parabon's work involved building trees from distant matches and cross-referencing with local records, immigration patterns from Gasparina, and phenotype predictions. Surveillance at the airport ensured a non-invasive sample collection meeting legal standards for confirmation. Laboratory testing confirmed the match to exclusion of all others. The 2023 sentencing hearing included full victim impact testimony detailing the lifelong effects on Lindy's husband, siblings, parents' families, and friends. Sinopoli's attorney described the plea as appropriate given the strength of the evidence. The court emphasized law enforcement persistence and scientific advances rather than any voluntary confession. The case stands as a documented application of genetic genealogy to a 1975 homicide with limited initial physical evidence beyond biological traces. All procedural steps followed chain of custody and evidentiary standards. Lindy's body was buried following the autopsy, with family maintaining the gravesite despite the 1976 vandalism. No further public appeals for information were needed after the identification and conviction. The resolution occurred 48 years after the murder through combined traditional cold case review and modern DNA tools. On December 13, 1976, 16-year-old Carol Dean Hutto left her family home on Corvette Drive in Largo, Florida. She told her mother she was going to the store and would return soon. Instead, she met 17-year-old James Quinn, a neighbor who lived nearby. The two had been in a relationship. Carol did not return home that night. The next day, December 14th, her body was found in a pond less than a mile from her residence. She was partially clothed and weighed down with concrete blocks. The autopsy determined the cause of death as drowning. She was alive when placed in the water. Carol was a student at Largo High School. James Quinn was also a local teenager at the time. Police identified him early as a person of interest. He provided an alibi that investigators could not confirm. Quinn denied involvement in the murder. Evidence at the time included limited physical traces. The case lacked sufficient forensic proof for immediate charges under 1970s technology. It went cold. Carol's family and the Largo community dealt with the unsolved homicide for over 2 decades. Quinn joined the U.S. Navy and became a petty officer. He served on submarines and maintained a career while denying any role in Carol's death. In 1994, Pinellas County cold case investigators, including Detective Brad Hoyes, reopened the file. They located Quinn through military records. NCIS assisted. In July 1998, investigators interviewed Quinn again. Confronted with case details, he provided a statement. He first claimed he and Carol met at an abandoned house under construction. They talked, kissed, and had consensual sex. During horseplay, she fell, hit her head, lost consciousness, and he believed she was dead. He panicked and dumped her body in the pond. Prior to trial, Quinn changed his account. In the revised taped statement played for the jury, he admitted Carol resisted his attempts at sex. She hit and scratched him and began yelling. He grabbed her by the throat to silence her. When that failed, he struck her over the head with a 2x4 board. He then poked her in the chest with a stick and choked her further. He stated he did some of these actions to mislead investigators. He dragged or carried her to the pond and weighted the body with concrete blocks to sink it. The autopsy findings aligned with drowning as the final cause, confirming she was still alive when submerged. Prosecutors used the evolving statements against him. Carol's personal diary contained entries that raised suspicion toward Quen and provided context on their relationship. In 1998, DNA technology advanced enough for retesting of preserved evidence. The threat of DNA analysis contributed to Quen's decision to provide further statements. Hair found on jeans linked to the case was later tested but did not match Quen. The prosecution relied primarily on his confessions, inconsistencies in his accounts, and circumstantial placement. Quen's 2000 trial took place in Pinellas County. Testimony included details from the reopened investigation, his 1998 interviews, and Carol's diary references. The jury deliberated for 22 minutes before returning a verdict of guilty on first-degree murder. On February 16, 2000, Quen, then 40 years old, was sentenced to life in prison. Under 1976 sentencing guidelines applied in the case, he became eligible for parole after 25 years. The court heard victim impact statements from Carol's family, including her mother. Quen maintained elements of his innocence claims even after conviction. The investigation spanned 24 years from the December 13, 1976 disappearance and December 14 body discovery to the 2000 conviction. Early 1976 work involved neighborhood canvassing, interviews with Quen, and attempts to verify his alibi. Physical evidence at the pond scene included the weighted body and signs of drag or transport. The abandoned or under-construction house was examined for traces. Limited serological testing existed at the time but did not produce conclusive individual results. The case file accumulated notes, statements, and negative leads over decades. Reopening in the mid-1990s leveraged improved record access, including military personnel files. Detective Hoyes and colleagues cross-referenced Quen's Navy service with the cold case. The 1998 interview produced the first admission of presence with Carol that night. Subsequent refinements in the statement supplied the prosecution's core evidence. Diary entries helped establish motive elements around the relationship and any conflicts. No eyewitnesses to the actual killing came forward in either the original or reopened phases. Carol Hutto was born in 1960. She was one of multiple children in her family. Neighbors remembered the impact of her disappearance and the discovery in the local pond. The community experienced fear during the initial unsolved period. Quen lived in the same neighborhood, increasing the personal nature of the crime for residents. After joining the Navy, he continued service without public disclosure of the open case until the cold case unit located him. Post-conviction, Quen served his life sentence in Florida Department of Corrections custody. Parole eligibility under the original guidelines placed potential review after 25 years served. The case received coverage in national true crime media, including Cold Case Files episode Carol's Diary, which detailed the diary's role and the long-term investigation. Swamp Murders and other programs also covered the facts. The resolution combined traditional confession evidence with the pressure of advancing DNA capabilities even when some tested items excluded direct matches. The physical evidence processing followed standard protocols for the era. The body recovery involved divers or officers retrieving the weighted remains. Autopsy documented water in the lungs consistent with drowning while alive, along with blunt force trauma to the head and neck injuries. Clothing state supported the sexual assault context described in Quen's statements. Concrete blocks used as weights were noted in scene reports. No fingerprints or immediate biological matches linked Quen in 1976 due to technological limits and scene conditions. Investigators in the 1990s re-interviewed original witnesses and re-examined stored property. Quen's mother provided testimony referenced in some accounts of the proceedings. His military career included submarine duty, during which shipmates later expressed surprise at the conviction. The trial venue remained in Pinellas County. The short jury deliberation reflected the weight given to the detailed confession and its inconsistencies with earlier denials. Sentencing followed Florida statutes applicable to 1976 first-degree murder convictions. The Hutto family waited 24 years for a conviction. Carol's mother addressed Quen directly at sentencing, referencing the loss of her daughter's future. The case exemplified challenges in pre-DNA era investigations where perpetrator proximity and relationship existed but physical proof required later advances or admissions. Quen's Navy service delayed resolution until cold case persistence matched him to the file. No additional homicides were publicly linked to him in official records. Further procedural records show the 1998 charging after the interviews. Quen was arrested while stationed or living through military channels. Pretrial motions addressed the admissibility of his statements and diary references. The prosecution presented a timeline placing Quen with Carol that evening, his unconfirmed alibi, and the evolution of his explanations. Defense arguments challenged the reliability of the statements given the passage of time and interrogation context. The jury accepted the first-degree murder elements of premeditation or felony circumstances tied to the assault. The pond location in Largo was a known area near residential zones. The under-construction house served as the admitted meeting site. Drag evidence or footprints were limited by weather and time between the incident and discovery. Concrete blocks suggested intent to conceal the body. Carol's red jacket or other clothing items aided identification. The diary provided contemporaneous notes on her interactions with Quen. Reopened forensic testing in the late 1990s included attempts at DNA on preserved items, with the threat contributing to the detailed confession. Hair comparison on genes was conducted but returned non-matching results to Quen. All documented actions rest on court testimony, police reports, autopsy findings, and contemporaneous news coverage from the St. Petersburg Times and other outlets. The 2000 conviction and life sentence closed the 1976 homicide. Quen began serving the term immediately after sentencing. The case stands as a verified cold case resolution through combined confession evidence and cold case review after 24 years. No successful appeals overturning the verdict are recorded in major public summaries. Carol Hutto's remains were buried following the original autopsy. Memorial details and family statements appear in coverage of the trial and sentencing. The investigation file transitioned from unsolved to adjudicated with the jury verdict and judicial sentence. On July 17, 1982, in Marshallville, Ohio, 11-year-old Krista Leah Harrison and a 12-year-old friend named Roy Wilson were collecting aluminum cans at the Marshallville Village Park softball field, roughly 100 yards from Harrison's home. Harrison had ridden her sister's 10-speed bike to the park. A man in a reddish-brown van with bubble-shaped rear windows approached. He grabbed Harrison, forced her into the vehicle, and drove away. Roy Wilson provided a description. A white male, medium height, approximately 25 to 35 years old, with shoulder-length dark hair and a mustache. Witnesses reported the abduction. No ransom demand followed. Volunteers, tracker dogs, a helicopter, and the FBI conducted searches. A $10,000 to $13,500 reward was offered. Composite sketches were released. The small village of 750 to 900 residents locked doors and maintained high alert. 6 days later, on July 23, 1982, turtle trappers discovered Harrison's decomposing body in a wooded area off Township Road 464 near a shed in Holmes County, approximately 30 to 35 miles from the abduction site, outside Loudonville. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition due to high summer temperatures, consistent with having been kept inside a hot vehicle for days. She had been sexually assaulted, including with a rigid object such as a vibrator, beaten and strangled. A large plastic bag partially wrapped her lower body. A blood-stained L-shaped cardboard box from a Sears leather van seat, a Budweiser towel, a clump of her hair, gloves, men's jeans, and a plaid shirt were found nearby. Her father, Gerald Harrison, identified the remains. She was buried in Maple Grove Cemetery in Marshallville. Autopsy confirmed the cause of death as strangulation. Nutmeg or orange-colored trilobal polyester fibers were recovered from Harrison's hair and the towel. Microscopic analysis indicated they originated from carpet. Identical fibers had been found on the body of 12-year-old Tina Marie Harmon, raped and murdered 8 months earlier in a neighboring area. Herman Ray Rucker had been convicted of Harmon's murder on circumstantial evidence and was incarcerated at the time of Harrison's abduction. Authorities linked the cases through the shared fiber evidence, sexual assault, and strangulation. The plastic bag traced to a specific factory in Pioneer, Ohio, used for packaging black leather van seats sold briefly through Sears. The bloodstained box matched the same product. Sales records showed 23 buyers in northern Ohio. None initially matched a van fitting the witness description. No immediate arrest occurred. In 1983, 43-year-old Robert Anthony Buell, a former Akron city planner and loan and grant specialist in the Akron Planning Department, abducted a 28-year-old female gas station manager in Damascus, Ohio. He held her at gunpoint, took her to his home in Clinton, shaved her head, beat her, tortured her with electrical cords, bound and handcuffed her to a bed, and raped her over approximately 12 hours. She escaped after he left for work and alerted police. Buell, born September 10, 1940, in Norwood, Ohio, had a history of similar sexual assaults on women in their late 20s to 40s. He owned a 1978 reddish-brown Dodge van. The rear windows had been replaced from bubble-shaped to rectangular. Investigators compared the orange carpet fibers from Harrison's body to those in Buell's van and home. They matched. Buell had purchased the Sears van seats matching the box and bag at the dump site. Paint on the jeans near the body matched paint from Buell's residence. The jeans and plaid shirt were consistent in size and style with items he owned. Spray paint in his garage matched traces on the cardboard box. A fingerprint on plastic at the scene did not match Buell. He pleaded no contest to the abduction and rape of the gas station manager and another woman, receiving a 121-year sentence. He denied involvement in Harrison's murder. Buell was indicted for aggravated murder, kidnapping, and felonious sexual penetration in Harrison's case. The trial venue moved to Cuyahoga County due to pretrial publicity. On April 4, 1984, a jury convicted him of aggravated murder with specifications and related counts. The jury recommended death. He was sentenced to death on April 11, 1984. He maintained innocence, claiming the real killer remained free. Appeals included challenges to witness hypnosis and other issues, all denied. He was never charged in the Harmon or other cases during his lifetime. Buell lived a double life. He had a college education, manicured lawn, and was respected professionally. He was divorced with one daughter and had a girlfriend with children whom he took camping and to softball games. Neighbors described him as friendly and outdoorsy, interested in hiking, scuba diving, and skiing. After his arrest, some recalled changes in behavior, including longer hair and a different style. His ex-wife and girlfriend initially supported him. Dog hairs from his property later linked to evidence in other cases. In 2010, post-execution DNA testing confirmed Buell raped and murdered Tina Marie Harmon in 1981. He was also suspected in the 1983 murder of 10-year-old Deborah K. Smith, with matching candle wax evidence, though never charged. Other sexual assault victims identified him on September 25, 2002. At age 62, Robert Anthony Buell was executed by lethal injection at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility. His final meal was a single black unpitted olive. In his final statement, he addressed Krista's parents, "Jerry and Shirley, I didn't kill your daughter. The prosecutor knows that. And they left the real killer out there on the streets to kill again and again and again." He denied the Harrison murder to the end. The execution followed 18 years on death row with multiple stays. The investigation relied on fiber analysis available in the early 1980s, trace evidence from the Sears product, and the link established after Buell's arrest for the adult rape. No DNA was used in the original conviction. Later DNA confirmed additional crimes. The case appeared in Forensic Files Season 5, Episode 8, Material Evidence. A memorial with Krista's photo and plaque stands in the Marshallville Park where she was abducted. The village experienced lasting impact, With increased caution and locked doors in the immediate aftermath, Buell's background included a difficult childhood with divorced parents and reported abuse. He served in the Navy, earned an honorable discharge, studied business at the University of Akron, and held banking and credit jobs before the planning department position. His criminal activity spanned at least from the mid-1970s, with an earlier abduction where the victim escaped. He was linked to assaults in multiple Northeast Ohio locations including Doylestown, Akron, Barberton, Lodi, and Jeromesville. Some reports placed potential additional victims. He was convicted only in the Harrison murder among the child killings. The physical evidence included the orange trilobal fibers matching Buell's van carpet, the specific Sears packaging materials, paint transfers, and clothing similarities. The witness description of the van aligned after accounting for window replacement reported by Buell's nephew. The adult victim's detailed account of the torture and rape provided the entry point for the search that yielded matching items. Harrison's body condition indicated prolonged retention in a vehicle. Sexual assault involved both penetration and foreign object use. Strangulation was manual or ligature. No fingerprints or direct biological matches were available at the time of trial for the murder charge. Post-conviction, Buell filed multiple appeals. Courts upheld the conviction and sentence. Prosecutors maintained the fiber and circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. Some journalists later speculated about possible involvement of others, including family members, but no charges resulted. DNA in 2010 closed the Harmon case officially with Buell as the perpetrator. Similar patterns in victim selection, method of assault, and disposal appeared across the linked crimes. Buell was never tried for the additional murders. He received additional sentences for the rapes totaling over a century. The resolution came 2 years after the abduction through persistent trace evidence work and the break from the adult kidnapping. Marshallville held community events and maintained the memorial. Krista's family endured the public trial and appeals process. The case demonstrated the value of microscopic fiber comparison before widespread DNA use in the 1980s. It also highlighted how one arrest for a separate crime could unravel multiple unsolved cases through physical matches. No additional public confessions from Buell occurred. He was pronounced dead after the lethal injection on September 25, 2002. The Harrison murder case file closed with the conviction and execution. On January 16, 1977, 2 hikers found a frozen male body in a cave just below the Pinnacle, a prominent overlook on the Appalachian Trail in Albany Township, Berks County, Pennsylvania. The location sits in a remote, mountainous section of the trail. The man wore light clothing unsuitable for winter conditions in the Appalachians. He had no camping gear, no food, and showed signs of an attempt to start a fire. The body was in a preserved state due to the cold temperatures inside the cave. Responders from the Berks County Coroner's Office and Pennsylvania State Police recovered the remains. No identification documents, wallet, or personal items that immediately named him were present. Initial estimates placed his age in the mid to late 20s. He stood approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed around 150 to 160 pounds. The autopsy determined the cause of death as a drug overdose involving phenobarbital and pentobarbital. The manner of death was classified as suicide. No evidence of trauma indicating foul play was found. Examiners took dental records and fingerprints during the autopsy. The fingerprints were placed on a card but later misplaced in storage. The body could not be identified through appearance, clothing, or belongings. A rudimentary sketch was created. The remains were buried in a potter's field in Berks County as an unidentified descendant. The case entered local records as the Pinnacle Man due to the discovery location near the Appalachian Trail peak. Nicholas Paul Grubb, known as Nicky the Family, was born January 3, 1950, in Pennsylvania. He lived in Fort Washington, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Grubb served in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard with Company C, 111th Infantry. He received an honorable discharge in 1971. In the mid-1970s, he had interactions with law enforcement, including a documented police encounter in Colorado in 1975 that placed his fingerprints into the automated fingerprint identification system. Grubb went missing from his family around mid-November 1976. His family reported him missing but had no confirmed location or contact after that point. Over the following decades, the Berks County Coroner's Office and Pennsylvania State Police reviewed the Pinnacle Man case periodically. Between 2009 and 2024, investigators compared the unidentified remains to at least 10 missing persons cases using available fingerprints and dental x-rays. None produced matches. In August 2019, the remains were exhumed from Potter's Field. Forensic examiners collected DNA samples and re-examined the bones to update the profile in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, known as NAMUS. Dental records were compared to 2 missing persons cases, one in Florida and one in Illinois. Those comparisons excluded matches. Genealogical DNA analysis conducted in 2023 also failed to produce an identification. Facial approximation was considered, but damage to the facial bones during or after the exhumation prevented effective reconstruction. The breakthrough occurred in early August 2024. Pennsylvania State Police Trooper Ian Keck, assigned to cold cases at Troop L, Reading Barracks, searched archives and located the original 1977 fingerprint card created during the autopsy. On August 12, 2024, Keck submitted the fingerprint card to NAMUS. An FBI fingerprint expert reviewed the card and matched it to Nicholas Paul Grubb's records in less than 1 hour. The match used Grubb's existing prints from his National Guard service and the 1975 Colorado police interaction. The Berks County Coroner's Office confirmed the identification on August 12, 2024. Nicholas Paul Grubb was 27 years old at the time of his death. The coroner's office notified a family member. The relative requested that Grubb's remains be interred in the family plot. Officials described the family as appreciative of the multi-agency efforts involving the Berks County Coroner's Office, Pennsylvania State Police, FBI, and NAMUS. The identification closed a 47-year unidentified remains case. The investigation into the full circumstances of Grubb's death remained active pending any final determinations. No new evidence of foul play emerged. The death remained classified as suicide by barbiturate overdose based on the 1977 toxicology. Grubb's case illustrated procedural challenges in predigital era unidentified remains investigations. Fingerprint cards from 1977 were physical documents subject to misfiling. Dental records and sketches provided limited leads without national centralized databases. NAMUS, launched in 2007, later centralized data for missing and unidentified persons. DNA extraction and genetic genealogy advanced many cases in the 2010s and 2020s, but in this instance, traditional fingerprints provided the resolution after archival recovery. Over the decades, the Pinnacle Man file accumulated comparisons, exhumation records, DNA profiles, and negative search results. Periodic media coverage kept the case visible to the public. Hikers and Appalachian Trail users occasionally referenced the story at the Pinnacle Overlook. The discovery site required physical effort to reach, involving a hike along the trail. The cave offered limited shelter. Grubb's light clothing and lack of supplies indicated he was not equipped for overnight exposure in January weather. Evidence of a fire attempt suggested awareness of the cold. Toxicology confirmed barbiturates consistent with intentional overdose. Phenobarbital and pentobarbital were prescription sedatives available in the 1970s. No suicide note was recovered. No belongings linked him directly to travel from Fort Washington to Berks County, roughly 75 miles northwest of Philadelphia. The Appalachian Trail corridor saw transient foot traffic even in winter. Post-identification. The Berks County Coroner John Fielding noted the case highlighted difficulties in cold case work and the value of persistent archival searches. Trooper Keck described the outcome as bittersweet, acknowledging the family's decades-long uncertainty. The remains, after exhumation and testing, were prepared for transfer to the family plot. No public details on Grubb's intervening life between 1971 discharge and 1976 disappearance were released beyond the National Guard service and Colorado contact. Family statements were limited to appreciation for the resolution. The Pinnacle Man identification added to resolved NAMUS cases through fingerprint recovery rather than advanced DNA or genealogy. Similar long-term unidentified cases in Pennsylvania and along the Appalachian Trail relied on combined methods including dental, anthropological, and biological data. In 1977, national databases like NAMUS did not exist. Local coroners managed storage and records with varying resources. Misplaced fingerprint cards delayed resolution until systematic cold case reviews in the 2020s. The 2019 exhumation preserved options for future testing even when initial DNA and genealogy did not succeed. Investigators ruled out connections to other regional cases through exclusionary comparisons. The absence of trauma supported the overdose determination. Barbiturate levels indicated lethal ingestion. Freezing occurred post-mortem in the cave environment. Decomposition was minimal due to sub-freezing temperatures. The 1977 autopsy photos, measurements, and clothing descriptions were retained in the file. Clothing items were catalogued as light outerwear typical of urban rather than wilderness use. No vehicle, campsite, or companion evidence was located near the Pinnacle. Grub's National Guard records provided baseline identifiers once fingerprints matched. The Colorado Police Interaction supplied the AFIS entry that enabled the final comparison. Archival searches succeeded where multiple missing persons comparisons over 15 years had not. The case required coordination across state police, county coroner, FBI lab, and NAMUS personnel. Total effort spanned initial 1977 response, decades of storage, 2019 exhumation, 2023 DNA work, and 2024 fingerprint recovery. Resolution time totaled 47 years and approximately 7 months from discovery to identification. The identification process demonstrated both limitations and strengths of long-term unidentified remains protocols. Physical evidence cards required physical location. Digital uploads to NAMUS accelerated expert review. FBI fingerprint databases held millions of records, allowing rapid matches when quality prints were available. In this instance, the 1977 card retained sufficient ridge detail for confirmation. No discrepancies arose between antemortem and postmortem data. The family received confirmation and options for final disposition. Public releases included photos of the fingerprint card and statements from officials. Media coverage in August and September 2024 detailed the timeline from hiker's discovery to archival match. Further procedural notes included chain of custody documentation for the fingerprint card from 1977 through recovery. Coroner's office staff photographed and cataloged all steps during the 2024 confirmation. The case file, once closed as unidentified, transitioned to identified with updated death certificate. No additional charges or investigations into third-party involvement were announced. The suicide classification stood based on toxicology, scene, and absence of trauma. Grubbs' remains, after nearly 5 decades, returned to family custody for burial. The Pinnacle location continued as a hiking destination with the resolved case noted in local historical references. This resolution aligned with broader national efforts through NAMUS to reduce unidentified remains backlogs. Pennsylvania cases benefited from state police cold case units and coroner persistence. Similar fingerprint recoveries or re-examinations closed other decades-old files. The Pinnacle Man case required no genetic genealogy or advanced isotopic testing once fingerprints surfaced. It underscored the enduring utility of original autopsy records when properly preserved and located. Officials emphasized collective agency contributions in statements. Family closure ended 47 years of unknown status for Nicholas Paul Grubbs' whereabouts and fate. The investigation file moved from active unidentified to resolved death case. Additional verified details maintained in records. Estimated postmortem interval consistent with mid-November 1976 disappearance to January 16, 1977 discovery. Winter weather preserved the body. No insect activity or scavenger interference noted due to cave conditions. Anthropological examination confirmed adult male, consistent with Grubbs' age. Dental records, while used for exclusions, were not the final identifier. DNA profiles entered into CODIS and other systems produced no offender hits, aligning with non-homicide determination. All comparisons to missing persons followed standard exclusion protocols. The 2019 exhumation required court or administrative approval for disturbance of Potter's Field burial. Samples were retained for potential future retesting. Facial bones damage limited artistic reconstruction options. The final fingerprint submission bypassed those limitations. The full sequence began with the January 16, 1977 recovery, 1977 autopsy and burial periodic reviews, 2019 exhumation and DNA collection, 2023 genealogy attempt, August 2024 card discovery and submission, same-day FBI match, family notification, and public announcement. All steps rested on documented coroner, police, and federal laboratory actions. No conflicting identifications occurred. Nicholas Paul Grubb was entered into official records as the pinnacle man decedent. The case exemplified methodical cold case resolution through archival diligence rather than singular technological advance. On September 21, 2001, a passerby spotted what appeared to be a mannequin floating in the River Thames near Tower Bridge in central London. Police recovered the item near the Globe Theatre on the South Bank. It was the torso of a young black male child. The head, arms, and legs had been removed. The torso wore only a pair of bright orange girls' shorts from the brand Kids and Company. Detectives named the victim Adam because he had no identification and no immediate matches in missing persons records. The case became known as the torso in the Thames. The post-mortem examination determined Adam was aged between 4 and 7 years old, most likely around 5 or 6. His throat had been slit, and his body had been drained of blood. He had been poisoned prior to death with a substance that paralyzed him, including extracts consistent with the Calabar bean. The dismemberment was performed with precision using sharp instruments, indicating expertise. The limbs and head were never recovered. Stomach contents were empty, suggesting he had been starved for a period before death. Forensic mineral analysis of his bones and isotope testing showed he had spent most of his life in West Africa, specifically the region around Benin City in southern Nigeria. He had been in the United Kingdom for only a few days or weeks at the time of his death. Adam had been circumcised. His remains showed no defensive wounds consistent with a prolonged struggle after poisoning. The orange shorts were traced to a batch of 820 pairs sold primarily at Woolworth stores in Germany. This suggested a possible trafficking route through Europe. No matching missing child report existed in the UK or immediately in Nigeria. Police concluded Adam had been trafficked into Britain, likely for the purpose of ritual sacrifice. The killing bore hallmarks of a muti-style ritual, a practice in parts of Africa where body parts are used in traditional medicine or to gain power, though adapted or distorted in this context. Some experts linked it to Yoruba spiritual practices involving water deities. The Metropolitan Police launched a major investigation under Detective Inspector Will O'Reilly. The case involved forensic pathologists, anthropologists, toxicologists, and international liaison with Nigerian and German authorities. The torso was found floating due to tidal action after being dumped upstream. No crime scene was identified in London. Police conducted house-to-house inquiries, reviewed CCTV, and appealed for information on any African child recently brought into the country. The investigation examined London's African communities, particularly Nigerian groups, for links to ritual practices or people trafficking. In 2002, police arrested Joyce Ojigid in Glasgow, Scotland. Her flat contained clothing similar to the orange shorts found on Adam. Ojigid was Nigerian and had connections to individuals in London. She was later deported. One of her associates, Kingsley Ojo, was arrested and convicted in 2004 of people trafficking offenses. He received a sentence of 4 years and 6 months and was deported to Nigeria in 2008. Ojo had links to the transport of children and adults from West Africa. In 2013, Ojigid told BBC journalists that Adam's real name was Patrick Erhaber and referred to Kingsley Ojo as Bawa. These claims were investigated but did not lead to charges in the murder. No definitive family members came forward to claim Adam. Forensic testing included DNA profiling that produced no matches in UK databases. Bone and hair samples confirmed West African origin with no close relatives identified in Britain. Stomach contents and toxicology revealed the paralyzing agent. The precision of the cuts suggested the perpetrator or perpetrators had anatomical knowledge or butchery experience. The disposal in the Thames indicated an attempt to hide the body and allow tidal dispersal of evidence. No fingerprints, fibers, or other trace evidence on the torso directly identified a suspect. The investigation explored links to muti practitioners, witch doctors, and organized trafficking networks operating between Nigeria, Germany, and the UK. Police visited Nigeria and worked with local authorities in Benin City. They consulted experts on African ritual practices, including South African pathologists familiar with muti cases. Adam's genitals were not removed, which differentiated this case from some typical muti patterns where specific organs are harvested. The orange shorts may have been placed on the torso post-dismemberment as part of a ritual element or to weigh or identify the remains in water. BY 2005. Adam was buried in an unmarked grave in Southwark Cemetery, South London, with a small ceremony attended by police officers who acted in place of family. The grave remains without a permanent named headstone due to his unidentified status. The Metropolitan Police continued periodic reviews of the case using advances in DNA technology, familial searching, and international databases. Appeals were made in 2011, 2021 on the 20th anniversary, and subsequent years for information from the public, particularly within Nigerian diaspora communities. No arrests have been made for the murder itself. The case highlighted challenges in investigating ritual killings involving trafficked children with no documented entry into the UK. Adam had no visa or immigration records matching his profile. Trafficking networks often used false identities or avoided official channels. The absence of the head and limbs prevented facial reconstruction or dental identification. No tattoos, scars, or distinctive marks were present on the recovered torso beyond circumcision. The investigation consumed significant resources and involved coordination across multiple countries and specialist fields. It remains one of the longest unsolved child murders in recent Metropolitan Police history. Further details from the forensic work included confirmation that the dismemberment occurred after death and after blood drainage. The poisoning agent caused paralysis but did not kill outright, allowing the throat to be cut while the victim was alive but immobile. This aligned with ritual requirements in some documented muti or sacrificial practices where fresh blood holds significance. The torso showed signs of being in the water for a short period consistent with recent disposal. River currents and tides placed the likely entry point further upstream in London. No matching body parts washed up in subsequent searches. Police examined possible links to other African ritual cases in Europe. They interviewed informants within communities about juju oaths, spiritual healers, and demands for child body parts to create protective medicines or potions for business success or power. Some witnesses described practices where children are brought from Nigeria for such purposes. No direct evidence connected a specific individual to Adam. Kingsley Ojo's trafficking conviction provided a potential network link but no murder charge. Joyce Ojijid's statements naming Patrick Erhaber were examined through Nigerian records without conclusive verification or family confirmation. The orange shorts provided one of the few physical traces. Manufacturing records showed distribution limited to certain European stores. This narrowed the possible purchase location but did not yield buyer information. The Metropolitan Police Gold Group oversaw the inquiry, employing novel forensic techniques for the time, including isotopic bone analysis to map geographic life history. Adam's bones retained signatures of Nigerian water and food sources for most of his short life. His arrival in the UK was estimated within days or a few weeks of the murdered NO suspect has been charged with Adam's murder as of the latest available records. The case file remains open with periodic forensic re-examination. Public appeals continue to seek anyone who knew a young Nigerian boy brought to London around September 2001 or who has information on ritual practices involving children. Adam's grave is maintained by police and cemetery staff. The investigation demonstrated the limitations of standard policing when dealing with cross-border trafficking and culturally specific crimes with minimal physical evidence. It prompted greater awareness of child trafficking risks within African diaspora communities in the UK. Additional procedural elements included exhaustive review of all missing children reports from relevant African countries, cooperation with Interpol, and specialist input from anthropologists on West African burial and ritual customs. The empty stomach indicated deliberate withholding of food, possibly as part of a preparatory ritual. The expert dismemberment suggested involvement of someone with medical, butchery, or sacrificial training. The Thames disposal showed knowledge of tidal patterns to disperse evidence. No DNA from the perpetrator was recovered due to the washing effect of the river and the nature of the remains. The full sequence begins with the discovery on September 21, 2001, post-mortem and forensic testing in late 2001 and 2002, arrests of Ojajid and Ojo in 2002 to 2004, burial in 2005, further witness statements including the 2013 BBC interview, and ongoing appeals through 2021 and beyond. All documented actions rest on Metropolitan Police releases, forensic reports, court records from related trafficking cases, and verified media accounts. No perpetrator has been convicted. Adam's identity and the full circumstances of his trafficking and death remain unconfirmed beyond the physical and scientific evidence indicating a ritual killing after trafficking from Nigeria. The torso recovery, analysis, and continued investigation represent the complete public record of the case.